On today's podcast.
Today's guest is going to open your eyes to the true concept of hydration. So forget everything you know about drinking water. And honestly, by the end of this episode, you're going to be redesigning your hydration habits and probably eating chia seed pudding for breakfast.
It's true, Melissa. I never really thought about eating my water to obtain optimal hydration and to really address things like blood sugar dysregulation, which so many of us are interested in, chronic fatigue, which plagues so many of us. So let's not waste any more time. Let's learn all about hydration with this episode.
If you're a healthcare provider tired of just treating symptoms and ready to dig deeper into the root causes of health issues, the Vibrant Wellness Podcast is for you. With insider tips, expert interviews, and the latest in biotech research, this podcast will take your patient care to the next level.
I'm your co-host, Dr. Emmy Brown, and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host, Melissa Gentile. Happy Monday, Melissa. I hope your week is off to a good start.
It is, Emmy. Thank you.
Great. Today, we are thrilled to have Dr. Dana Cohen, who is an internist turned renowned integrative medicine expert. Dr. Cohen brings a wealth of experience, having worked alongside the late Dr. Robert Atkins and dedicating her career to helping patients through the principles of integrative and functional medicine. As the co-author of the book Quench, Beat Fatigue, Drop Weight, and Heal Your Body Through the New Science of Optimum Hydration, Dr. Dana is clearly an expert on a topic that affects us all but is often overlooked: hydration and the healing power of water. So let's get ready to quench our thirst for hydration knowledge with Dr. Dana Cohen. Dr. Dana, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Dana, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today, and I really can't wait to dive into the topic of your book, Quench, and just all the misconceptions around hydration, partially selfishly, because I know I need to drink some more water. But first, I also want to highlight your background and just kind of your introduction into functional medicine as a whole, because it's always so interesting to hear each practitioner's entryway into the field. I find that for everyone, it's a little bit unique. So what caused you to make the shift into holistic medicine? Was it a case study, a personal experience, or did you just meet Dr. Atkins and the information just kind of resonated with you? Paint the picture of that pivotal moment for us.
So here I am finishing up residency. We have about 6 months left and in internal medicine. And honestly, I hated it. I felt like I wasn't helping anybody, but now I'm $200,000 in debt. I can't turn around. I can't do another. I have to start making money. So I have to sort of move forward. And I went to the office, there was a wall of jobs. And when I saw this one that said World-Renowned Wellness Center in New York City, and I was like, ooh, it felt like a spa. And I was like, what is that? And I took it off the wall so nobody would get it. And
it was yours.
And I called it, and it was for Dr. Atkins. It was for the Atkins Center. And I remember thinking, it was a headhunter. And I remember thinking, number one, I'm on the diet. And I remember before I went on the diet, me and a bunch of our other residents were doing the diet. And if anybody ever knows, the first time you do a really low carb keto diet, it's life changing. You feel amazing. And here we are walking around the hospital with pepperoni and cheese in our pockets, because at the time you didn't differentiate. And we all felt incredible. I had lost weight. I had more energy. It was an incredible experience. And so I got really excited. And I told the headhunter, I was like, oh my God, I'm on the diet. And so I went for the interview, and I met him, and he changed my life. And I got the job, and I ended up taking the job. And I know it was nothing I sought out. I don't come from a healthy family or a particularly healthy background, but I thank God, because he changed everything for me, and the way I practice medicine. And I remember the first 6 months I fought him on everything too. Like, what is this? Where's the research in these, vitamin drips? He was so far ahead of his time, which is now so mainstream almost. There's vitamin drips for everywhere. So yeah, it was just a freak thing. And so I went right out of residency and started doing integrative medicine.
I love the honesty of that story. And I think it's so cool that you were already on the diet. So it really just spoke to you.
And you were following the Atkins diet, Dr. Dana, before you saw that job posting. Is that correct?
Totally. Yeah. And I even remember, one of my female friends had shown me the book. And me and a couple of other girls, she's like, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And then I remember we shopped it around the hospital too. We were asking cardiologists, like, is this safe? You think we can do this?
Yeah.
And like, there was, I don't know, nobody said no, because the truth was that this was around 1997, 98. And it was the second incarnation of the Atkins diet. The Atkins diet was a bestseller in like the 70s. And then it became huge in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. So, but I remember, we're all like, we're just going to do it. Let's just do it. Let's see how we feel. And we were all like giggly and giddy, like and anybody who's ever done that, within 3 days, your cravings are gone, your energy is skyrocketing. And there's no better time. As a resident, we were working sometimes 36-hour shifts and having energy like I never had before. So yeah, it was eye-opening.
Amazing. So you hadn't sought out work with him prior to that happenstance moment where you saw the job listing, though, even though you were having these amazing benefits from the diet. Or I wonder if we were thinking about maybe going into nutrition or having that as a component of your practice.
Honestly, it never even dawned on me. I was a primary care internal medicine doctor. That's all I knew. I didn't even think it could have been. I didn't know. I didn't even know he had an office in New York. I didn't know any of it. So it was a complete gift.
Sounds like it was meant to be. Well, I really want to dive into the nitty gritty here, Dr. Dana. In terms of hydration, I've heard you cite quite a staggering statistic, and at least as an estimation, you predict about 90% of us are dehydrated, and we don't even know it. So not this frank, overt hydration, but this subclinical hydration, we're not even aware. You think maybe 90% of us. Why are so many of us dehydrated?
Well, so first of all, we live in environments, we live indoors, and we either have, if you're like me in New York, you have the heat on, which is, I think, way more dehydrating than summertime. So people don't take winter as being very dehydrating. If you live in New York and you have those radiators that emit steam, like they suck all of the moisture out of the air. So our environments play a role: heat, air conditioning, indoors, being sedentary, our food. We're eating all this processed food. Over 60 or 65% of most of us, what we eat is processed, ultra processed foods. That plays a role. We have to, how does that food get metabolized? You need to hydrate better. Medications play a role. I think I said being sedentary. So there's all these reasons why our environments, and what about, cell phones and electronics and ultraviolet lights and all these things that are just sucking the moisture out of our air. We live in a different world than we did even 10 years ago. So I think, and not only that, I'm going to say one other thing. I think we're all so driven to perform better and sit at our desks and do all that work, and we don't get up and move. We don't get up to hydrate. And in fact, we teach ourselves not to hydrate because we don't want to get up to pee, because we don't want to get out of the car, so we stop ourselves from being hydrated, right? And honestly, our bodies learn that, and our thirst mechanism goes away over time because we've taught ourselves so well.
Yeah, there's all this compensation that's really backfiring on us, it sounds like, too. And is there a story behind how you got into this work on hydration? Because, I'm wondering, you had such a inspiring story in terms of how you got into integrative medicine, but what about hydration in particular? Was there a particular case study or a book or some kind of paper?
So, it all goes back to Dr. Atkins. No.
Okay. I was wondering that
not
too.
really. So the truth is, what goes back to him is that I have known for my whole career, if you want a platform in this field, you have to have a book. Right. So I have been searching for my book, searching. I do a lot of hormones in my practice. I do a lot of thyroid in my practice. But the truth is, I didn't want to write another hormone book or a thyroid book where, the line, the bottom line is that, you got to go see your doctor and get blood levels and get a prescription. Like, how much more can I can I say about it? Turns out probably I could have said more, but it wasn't what I wanted to write. I wanted to affect how could I affect the most people? And my co-author, Gina Bria, came in to see, she called me one day and she's like, a friend of mine had referred her. She runs this thing called the Hydration Foundation. Can she come in and talk to me about some of the work that she's doing? And I remember thinking, oh God, she's going to sell me some kind of, Ponzi scheme about some water filter thing that she's selling. But I was like, I knew the friend. I was like, sure, come on in. And so she came down and sat down with me and basically blew my mind. So she started telling me about the work of Dr. Pollack, Gerald Pollack, who's a world-renowned water researcher who had discovered that there's this other phase of water. And I was like, what? And by the way, the book was published almost 5 years ago. So it's not a new book. It continues to sell. It continues to have legs because it's got a message that we all need to hear over and over and over again, right? And it's funny because when I first started, I used to be afraid to talk to other doctors or practitioners. Like, what am I going to teach them about hydration? What I've learned is that we all need to hear it. We all need to keep hearing it because of that low-grade dehydration that we all experience day in and day out. So it's important. It's the one thing I'm a stickler on, by the way, with my patients. Give me the 80-20 rule with food and I'm happy. Hydration day in, day out, hour by hour, we need to stay on top of it.
I love that you're so straightforward with like, hey, like there's so much information, like you said, about hormones, detox, whatever that are selling all different types of different protocols, supplements, et cetera. But you're like, hey, what can I like just put in front of people that every single person can benefit from?
Yeah.
And it's just so important and so crucial and so basic,
To write the book that the person who's never picked up a health book could pick up and find benefit in it. And honestly, I think I did. I hear back from people that it's life-changing. And I'm like, life-changing by hydrating, by eating real food and hydrating, like, hello. And the thing is, it's easy. It's not hard. It's not like an Atkins diet, which is hard. It's expensive, those kind of things. And I'll be honest with you, that was 25 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that. What I've learned is that people yo-yo on that diet. It's not sustainable for almost all of us. Yes, it's a great way to lose weight quickly. It's a great way if somebody's got a blood sugar of 300 and they're a type 2 diabetic, like, oh my God, stop. Let's get your, so it's good for some people, but it's not sustainable. Hydration will help everyone and it is sustainable and it's easy. So that's what I set out to do. And so when Gina started to tell me about the work of Gerald Pollack, who is the guy who wrote The Fourth Phase of Water, very interesting. And I was like, what are you talking about? Another phase of water? We all know that water exists as liquid, ice, and vapor. That's what we've learned our whole life. Now you're telling me there's some new phase of water? And she's like, yeah. And so she had me intrigued. And then we started talking. We had her mother died of Alzheimer's. My mother died of Alzheimer's. We had this whole thing in common, and the hydration piece was something I had been, and as she's telling me, I just looked at her and said, Gina, I've been searching for this my whole career. This is the book. Are you interested in writing this book with me? And she's never expecting that that's where this was going to go. And she said, yeah. And so we set out to write the book on hydration. And what I learned very quickly is that water, the simplest molecule in the world, turns out to be the most complex molecule in the world. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? I know nothing about this. Like, it is incredibly just so vast and complicated. But I think that we, spoke to all the right people, teased it down to the essence, and the book is, super easy to read. And there's a lot of science that backs up what we have to say in there. There's a ton of studies, but the complexity, at first I was like, I don't think I can do this, but then we got it done.
I have to know, Dr. Dana, did you propose the book upon first meeting your co-author? I'm sorry, I missed her name.
Gina Bria. She's an anthropologist, and she runs the Hydration Foundation. And it's basically, right now she's working on very interesting stuff on how to work with structured water, which we'll talk about, I guess, a little bit later. Structured water is really the stuff of what Dr. Pollack is talking about, and how to use structured water to help with soil health and that kind of thing. So she's doing amazing, fun stuff.
Awesome. Well, I do want to definitely dive into some of the tangible stuff that's in your book about how to hydrate. But before we even get there, kind of backtracking, I want to focus on just like how common like dehydration is. So I do want to ask you, how does dehydration really affect all the body systems? Just kind of overview. We don't need to get into the nitty gritty of every body system, but especially like brain health and, energy levels. Like you were saying how great you felt on the Atkins diet. Like I'm sure a lot of people are struggling with fatigue and whatnot. So I would just want to know like how much of that can be rooted in dehydration and how much that can actually make us feel better if we dehydrate.
So great question. So first of all, there is not a podcast or a news thing or anything I ever talk about that I don't say this line, that so learning how to hydrate properly is the single most important thing you can do to treat and prevent any chronic disease. So that alone is like, should be mind blowing for people to treat and prevent chronic disease. That is what is bankrupting our medical system. And, so I'm talking diabetes, I'm talking Alzheimer's, I'm talking heart disease. You must start with hydration first, right? So that's the big picture. In fact, there was a recent study last year. It wasn't published before the book was out and I've been saying this all this time, that proves that this low-grade subclinical dehydration, which we don't have good ways to measure, by the way. We don't have easy, simple ways to measure. But this low-grade subclinical dehydration is a cause of chronic disease. So, and that study was published.
What are some signs that people can look out for of that kind of like low grade dehydration? Just so I don't forget to ask you.
Yes. So that goes into fatigue is the big one. Fatigue, brain fog, constipation, dry skin, dry mouth, thirst. Thirst. People think this was mind blowing to me when I first learned it. Thirst is absolutely a sign of dehydration. It's not a normal thing. It's a symptom of dehydration. We're not meant to be thirsty. You want to stave that off before it even happens, because now you've reached that threshold where you're dehydrated, when you're thirsty. So yeah, those are the big ones. Joint pain, I want to say muscle aches, body aches, but not being able to move with fluidity. No pun intended, but stiffness. Those are all signs and symptoms of dehydration. But I think that the big thing that I really want to just sort of, put the nail in the coffin is that afternoon fatigue that we all often happens to us. We often say, oh, I got to eat something. My blood sugar is dropping. Mm-hmm. And that may be true for some, but I will almost guarantee that most it's from dehydrating. And that if you learn how to hydrate first, that you won't get those afternoon dips in energy or brain fog. So yeah, and I think energy and brain fog are the two big ones that I want to just point home. But I also have one other thing as far as a symptom. The real big thing I want to say, and I think this is, if you take home one message, this is the thing that I really think is super important. We are meant to urinate every 2 or 3 hours while we're awake during the day. And if you're not doing that, you're dehydrated. Forget about looking at the color of your urine, about your skin tests. We do mention these things and they're okay. They're not great. They're not perfect. But that peeing every 2 or 3 hours while we're awake is probably the single most important test or thing that you can do to make sure you're properly hydrated.
Wow, I really didn't know that. Every 2 to 3 hours, I feel like so many people during the workday probably don't do that because, like you said earlier, we're so zoned in on our work and at our desk, and we don't want to take the time. Or sometimes we're in meetings for longer than every 1 to 2 hours. I really like that you mentioned that how you kind of blame that afternoon for fatigue, or that the root cause of it could be dehydration, because I think that's a really common symptom. Right at 2 or 3 o'clock, people talk about adrenal fatigue, or that their blood sugar is low, or blood sugar imbalances. But it is interesting because I've actually experimented myself with trying to do some good salt and some lime in the water in the afternoon. And I feel like I don't need a snack or anything. It's almost like the hunger just kind of like dissipates. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't actually hungry. And to the listeners, don't listen to me. Maybe salt in your water is not great. We'll find out later on the episode, but just wanted to point that out.
Well, the other thing is, and sort of the same thing, but a different kind of thing, is that we often confuse hunger and thirst. So it's a different thing. Like where we think we may be hungry when we're really thirsty, but they're often confused. So try hydrating first before you go for the snack, or especially the sugar thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about caffeine, Dr. Dana? Caffeine as a dehydrating thing that so many of us are doing on a daily basis. Kind of what is your overall thought on coffee and caffeine in general?
I have great news for people.
Yay!
Yay. So, I don't know the actual grams, but under 4 cups of coffee. Now, it's not necessarily Starbucks cups because they have more caffeine, but there's a certain amount of caffeine, and we just say under 4 cups, it does not act as a diuretic.
Okay.
So
that's a pretty big max.
Yeah.
Pretty generous.
So, but I want to just with the caveat of this. If I were to drink 4 cups of coffee a day, I would be off the walls. Like not, like the adrenal stress of that can play other roles. But if from a hydration standpoint, it's not a diuretic, so you're not you're not losing hydration, and it counts. It counts towards hydration. The only drink that never, ever, ever counts as hydration is alcohol. It's absolutely, I unfortunately can't say anything great about alcohol.
I was afraid to ask the question about caffeine just because I know we're all so dependent on it, myself included. So
Is a few cups a day is fine. It counts.
It's a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
I think about when I was younger, I heard when Gloria Estefan was on tour, when she was a big music star, still is, her urine had to be clear. Her manager, her, fitness people, your urine has to be clear. So if we are looking into the toilet, we're looking at our urine and it's clear, are we diluting out electrolytes? Are we overdoing the water?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Once again, it's not a great measurement. Looking at the color of your urine, and this is my gut. This is not me as with my doctor hat on. I think if you have clear urine, you may be overhydrating, too much. There was this thing recently with Brooke Shields where she was doing a little cabaret show in New York, and she was hydrating and hydrating and hydrating, trying to keep her vocals and everything. And
another celebrity, and then it's out in the news, and
she had a seizure because she drank so much water that she peed out all her electrolytes, and she literally had a seizure. So but I mean that's highly unusual. But I will tell you, on a weekly basis, I see people's blood tests where their electrolytes, their sodium, specifically their sodium and their chloride, are too low or abnormally low. And I ask them, how much water are you drinking? Like, I drink so much water. I drink water all day long. And I'm like, well, I think you're overhydrating. You're peeing out your electrolytes. You need to add some salt or electrolytes to your water. So the clear urine, though, it's hard to say. Most people would do great if they're drinking that much water and they're peeing, like that's never a bad thing, but we can overdo it. So it's hard. It's not a perfect answer to that question, but.
And with that, you actually made me think of a couple of questions that I had thought of for later on, but I just thought I'd bring them up now is what do you think about people who are striving for that goal of like trying to get a whole gallon of water in a day? Like, I know that's been a big movement, and especially people on these, New Year's resolutions, carrying around their giant water bottles everywhere. That's probably too much water is from kind of what it sounds like. And I do have another question is like, do you think also, I've heard that sipping your water more slowly is going to be more hydrating than just kind of like chugging large amounts of water. Is that true? Or what do you think about that?
Okay. So first of all, yes, the gallon water challenge definitely scared me. Like I think that was not a great thing. And I think it was started by Tom Brady, but not all of us have the physique or the, the capacity to, who knows what, he's probably taking supplements, whatever. But I do think that the gallon water challenge is way too much. I think it's 128 ounces is a gallon, something like that. I have to look it up. Something. So if you twisted my arm around my back and you had to give me a number of how much water should we be drinking in a day, I think a better thing would be half your weight in ounces, right? So if you're drinking 128 something ounces, that means you weigh 240 pounds. So unless you weigh 240 pounds, I would not be drinking 128 ounces of water, or put some electrolytes in some of those cup glasses of water. So that's the first part of that. The second part was
how quickly with drinking water.
Yeah.
It gets better. Like if I chug this whole water that I have right now versus sipping it slowly over maybe like the next 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah. I don't really know, honestly. I think logically, the slower that you drink it and the more sort of homeostasis that your body has over time rather than sort of flooding, that feels like what it would be sort of logically, but we don't really know.
And you mentioned earlier about structured water, and I want to deep dive into that. What is structured water, and can you kind of bring the concept to light for those of us listening who have probably never heard the term before?
Yes. So I think at this stage, most of us have heard it before because there is so much information about this different phase of water that Dr. Pollack has really brought to light. Now, So I'm going to talk about Dr. Pollack because his work is not agreed upon by every water scientist, but his books are phenomenal. And I think his theory is on point and it's fascinating. And I think it's probably where it's going to pan out to be very true. So what he talks about is this other phase of water, and it's basically how water molecules, H2O, how they layer upon each other, right? And it's in that layering that they start to share electrons. And there's negative and positive charges. So when they're sharing those electrons, they're being attracted by each other. So that's basically all that structured water is. The water molecules become structured because they start to layer and they start to attract each other and they form this, it actually forms a different kind of water. So you think about a waterfall. A waterfall has energy. You feel that energy. If you've ever, or even when you go to the beach, like that water is a little different. It's a little thicker. It's maybe a little, it's slicker. It's hard to explain, but it has a different quality than regular bulk water. And that's all that structured water is. Now, we don't know, there are these devices these vortex devices that can structure water. I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of science that shows that they can do anything to help you in a physical way. But I have patients that swear by it. And I don't know if it's because now they're just hydrating better. Maybe. I don't know. But it certainly couldn't hurt. And, there are simple devices that can do these vortexing that structure your water. So that's all that is. And it's all, based on Dr. Gerald Pollack's work, who's the University of Washington in Seattle's world-renowned water researcher.
And where do we find structured water? I'm assuming all the water that we're drinking, like in whether it's bottled spring water or whether it's from the filter in our fridge, I'm assuming that both of those sources are not structured. So how do we get structured water? Or maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe the best, so first of all, it's believed that that's how water exists in nature. So think about water in plants and vegetables, that kind of thing. That's structured water. And it's also believed that that's how water is intracellularly within our cells, right? So the best way to get structured water is by eating your water, eating, vegetables, eating, so there's no better way. Now, there are certain things that help structure water, according to Dr. Pollack, and I think it's really interesting and fascinating. Anybody who wants to do a real deep dive should go read his books or look at some of his YouTube video. He does a great job of explaining it. So sunlight, any kind of light actually helps structure water. UV light, sunlight does it best, but the light that's bouncing off our tables right now and beaming onto us helps structure water. Fiber helps structure water. Minerals help structure water. So if you add salt, you're helping to structure your water a little bit. Smoothies, you're putting fiber and vegetables and blending them. That's helping to create structured water.
So in terms of clinical implication of structured water, Dr. Dana, is it safe to say it's more hydrating than water that's not structured? Is that the concept behind it generally?
That's what I have been touting. It's not medical science, it's not gospel in science, but that is what I believe to be true. I even go so far as to say that eating an apple, this is a big thing that me and Gina, my co-author, say all the time. 1 apple and 1 bottle of water is more hydrating than 2 bottles of water, because now you're having the apple with the fiber and the vitamins and the minerals that are help structuring it. Or 1 green smoothie is probably equivalent to drinking the same amount of 3 of the same size of green smoothies. It's not proven, but anybody who suffers from dehydration knows exactly what I'm saying to be true.
I can feel the difference. I mean, it seems like more anecdotal. Totally. You see that clinical difference, and that's powerful. And I'm sure that the science will continue to progress and advance. And it's exciting to keep learning about water in that way. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I would love to speak a little bit more about those clinical implications overall in terms of hydration. And you mentioned in the book that it speaks to modern day conveniences, as you mentioned before in today's podcast, such as processed foods, artificial environments. These things can thwart our best or our most well-intentioned efforts for health because we're dehydrated, which is such an interesting concept. So despite all of our efforts, this extremely foundational piece, which is hydration, may be really prohibiting us from reaching those goals. So I'm wondering if there's a patient case you wouldn't mind sharing with us wherein true hydration was really a game changer for that individual.
Yeah, let me come back to that 1 second because I want to just say
Sure.
they've done studies. They've showed studies where they've taken muscle biopsies of people who are sedentary and then dehydrate them. And they've taken the follow-up muscle biopsy. And what they've shown is that dehydration, that low-grade dehydration, 2%, which is what we all go through every day, it does the same to blood vessels as what a cigarette would do. Yeah. So think about that.
Terrible.
Right. And that's a spot in time. That's what I'm talking about, this day in and day out. Like, so when you have, if you're not staying on top of your hydration and you're having, a few hours of being subclinically dehydrated, like your vessels are showing damage, like they're getting damaged. So a patient, I have a patient who she does hot yoga, right? So I think she's got two things: that you're doing hot yoga, you're sweating, it's a long class, and she's super fit. Like, this is a really healthy girl just trying to, and says, I can never quench my thirst. I can never get quenched. I'm always thirsty. I drink a ton of water, blah, 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 blah. And all we did with her was say, well, try this. Wake up, do some salt in your morning water with a little bit of maybe a little lemon, just for more minerals. You're getting, and when I say salt, we're talking about the full spectrum real salt. So Celtic sea salt or pink salt, or literally like Himalayan, like rock salt. There's a brand called Real Salt, which I love. So start your day off with that, big glass of water, and then a green smoothie a day, which she was already kind of doing. And then the last thing was an electrolyte mix, like a store-bought electrolyte mix. There's tons of them out there. I'm on the board of one called Cure Hydration, which I think is excellent. So that was all it took. It was that easy. And she couldn't believe how much better she felt, how much better her performance was, and her thirst was finally quenched by just doing some simple things. And then, there are the people that walk into my office who are so sick, so can't move, so everything hurts them. They're in so much pain. And all I do is like, all right, I'm going to draw your blood, so get your whole history. I'm going to send you on your way. It's going to take about 3 weeks for you to get everything back. This is what I want you to do in the next 3 weeks. Just focus on this. Really easy. And literally coming back to the office, hopping up and down, saying, I feel so much better. All I did was learn how to hydrate, have a green smoothie a day, and it's hydration. I mean, they're also probably eating better because they're getting more real food with the smoothies, more, fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing. So I see that all the time.
And is that the gel water you refer to in the book, Dr. Dana, when we think about produce and the hydration we get from produce?
Sort of. Gel water equals structured water equals easy water, which is what Dr. Pollack calls it, equals, fourth phase of water. So, but gel water has sort of taken on a whole new term. Think about aloe. Okay. When you open an aloe leaf, all that gel flows out. That's loaded with gel water. Now, it's not just gel in there because there's also fiber. There's also other kind of, I'm blanking on the word, of things that are in that. But that gel that flows out is loaded with structured water or gel water. So gel water can be used simultaneously with structured water.
And you said easy water is a synonym.
Easy water is what Dr. Pollack calls it. It stands for exclusionary zone. Because, if any science nerds out there, it's really interesting. He calls it exclusionary zone because this kind of water literally filters itself. So it creates, I know, it's fascinating. It creates this wall of area that is impermeable to even the tiniest of bugs and toxins. So it's fascinating. Mother Nature is an incredible.
Beyond fascinating. Yeah. I thought easy water. I wonder what that means. But now I have to dive into that
it's
research.
Really cool.
That's fantastic.
And just to clarify, is this easy water is also in like the fruits and vegetables and the food sources? Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Once again, that's what it's believed to be in that form. It's called, it's even called colloidal water. Like there's lots of different names for it. And some have a few little different theories again of maybe what the chemical structure is of that. Because even Dr. Pollack it's no longer H2O once it's structured. It's H3O2, but it's made by H2O layering upon each other, sharing those electrons, and then it becomes H3O2. So, so it's not every water scientist agrees with that, but they all agree there is some other phase. And as it turns out, there's probably many more phases of water that we don't know.
You mentioned that this type of easy water can kind of detoxify itself potentially. But can you share some insights on how environmental factors such as like climate and pollution affect our hydration needs, and just maybe some resources for finding water that, isn't contaminated with pollutants? I know that's kind of a big question. Is my Brita filter working? Yes or no?
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So great question. Let's just take a step back, because detoxification is, it is a super important. If we can't detoxify, we're going to die in a day. Like, we have to get rid of these toxins in our bodies, right? And the only way that we get rid of toxins are peeing, pooping, breathing, and sweating. All of those require hydration, right? So if you're dehydrated, and anybody knows this, if anybody's ever been hungover, what's the first thing? You have to hydrate to get rid of it. You have to hydrate at the end of the night to help get rid of those alcohol poisons. That right? So detoxification is super, super important, and it requires hydration, and it requires a lot of hydration. So with that being said, then let's, on the flip side now, toxins in our water, completely different subject. How do we deal with that? So it's a real thing. We know that the lead fiasco that happened in Flint, Michigan is a very real thing. There are kids that will forever be affected by it for the rest of their lives. They're brain damaged. It's horrible. So we don't talk about filters in the book. We don't talk about, I send people to the environmental working group, ewg.org, and they have a list of filters, how they work, what you can afford budget-wise, why they work. But even more important is they have where you can search by where you live, by what toxins are in your water from your home. So I think that's without having to go and get your water tested and spend that kind of money. You can start there and then see what you need. The one thing I do like to talk about is, there was that lead fiasco. There's that kind of stuff, which Brita does pull out, by the way. What Brita does not pull out is fluoride. And I do think that the fluoride story is really coming to light now. We as functional integrative medical doctors have been complaining about it for so long, and the fluoride is a direct toxin to our thyroid. And it makes me wonder, is that why the, hypothyroid is so rampant among people? Mm-hmm. So, but fluoride is put in our water, and regular Brita filters don't pull it out. And I think the only place as of now, there might be more now as of now, but the one place I do know of is Portland, Oregon has taken fluoride out of their water. But it's a byproduct. It's of chemicals, and it should not be in there. Now, topically, fluoride is what all those studies have been shown to help prevent cavities. Mm-hmm. Nobody said anything about ingesting fluoride for preventing cavities. It's a little BS.
That could be a whole nother conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
As we're touching on these contaminants in the water, and fluoride, it's not even really contaminant. It's intentionally added in there. But I'm just wondering, Dr. Dana, are you looking at environmental medicine in terms of our water quality? Are you testing for toxins in folks? Is this motivating for patients to maybe focus more so on their quality of water?
Yeah, I do testing for heavy metals, but it depends. It really depends. I think the whole world should just start with detoxification. Start doing some cleanses, those kind of things. They've been shown to help pull heavy metals, and if that's what you're looking for, always sort of start there. And then if I find that there's some weird symptoms that I can't get to the root cause of, then maybe go into some testing, because it does tend to open a can of worms, unfortunately. Sure. So I think we need to have a good head on our shoulders as a practitioner on I could do literally $5,000 worth of testing when somebody walks in the door, and you're going to find stuff. I mean, we've all been, not maybe you guys are younger than I am, but I've been exposed to leaded gasoline, lead paint, And that has a half-life of like 30 years, mercury,
Mm-hmm.
so those things do tend to sit in our bodies. So sometimes we're opening up a can of worms that we may or may not, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get tested. But I think it's more important of having the right practitioner who can really talk to you and try to find that root cause, because it's not always necessarily heavy metals or something. I think a lot of some of my peers tend to do too much testing when it may or may not be the right thing to do, or the necessary thing to do. It's certainly not going to hurt you, but then you're opening up a whole thing that may not, that a cleanse could have taken care of, right?
Sure. What about testing that you're going to run regardless? Maybe there's another indication and you're starting to see signs of this subclinical hydration. I know you said there's no standard way to test for this. Of course you can get your electrolytes on your CMP, but are there any other signs on maybe routine blood work that you start to say, ooh, this maybe points towards subclinical hydration. This might incentivize my patient?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it wasn't until that study that I just told you about that came out earlier this year that low-grade dehydration is a cause of chronic disease. And the marker that they used was a low sodium. A high sodium level.
Ah.
So even, normal high sodium. So I'm definitely taking a much closer look at sodium, which I didn't do even when I wrote the book. And so now over the past year, I'm looking a little more closely at their sodium levels, how, there's nuances of all these tests, of all testing that we do. And that was just one that it never even dawned on me to look at. We know, I'm trying to give you a good example of vitamin D, right? So people could have normal vitamin D levels at 32 when the range is 30 to 100. At 32, you're deficient as far as I'm concerned. We want it optimal. So I'm looking at optimizing. So sodium could be a really interesting thing for hydration. And I'm definitely way more aware of it now when I look at their blood tests.
And I'm sure you see
really
even
the
trends, if you're running
Yeah.
6 months to a year. I mean, some people really just, okay, they're steady every single year. I might say that's a good thing, but maybe it's not. If there is some kind of sign or something, health risk it's associated with, in this case, dehydration. So I think that's helpful to say, well, maybe we actually want this to be a little bit lower, because you're always high normal is what you're saying on sodium, right? Could be the case.
Yeah. You want it really well in the middle. You don't want it. Yeah. So just sort of looking at those kind of numbers. And then the other thing, there are sort of ways to measure intracellular and extracellular water in our bodies. But it's unfeasible for most people to do those kind of tests. And they're not easily found. They're done in labs. They're done in, so sort of, these bone dense, like DEXA scans. There are some other ones like InBody and these BIA machines, body impedance analysis, that sort of look at that. I think those are better utilized as trending, right? So versus a one shot in time doesn't really give you your intracellular, extracellular water. It's more sort of looking at those trends. Right. Yeah, I think those are the things but it's not easily measured, unfortunately, the hydration. I do hope that we can come up with a really simple, who knows? I don't know what that could be, but a really simple test where they put something to your skin and say, "Oh yes, you're perfectly hydrated."
It's almost like some people need to see it on paper. It's like sometimes analyzing like symptoms just doesn't hit the same as seeing a black and white, or like seeing, your marker in the red zone. It's kind of like, oh, wow, I'm not doing well there. I need to, take a look at this. I think for some patients it kind of helps. So
Well, go back to what I said earlier. If you're not peeing every 2 or 3 hours, you're dehydrated. So start doing hash marks when you're sitting at your desk and see how many times you've got up to pee. I've done it. I was like, oh my God, it's
Keep
5
track.
o'clock. I've been sitting here for 8 hours, 9 hours, and I have not gotten up to pee once all day. I'm like, and I know better. So, I think that's a pretty easy way to see it in black and white.
well, Dr. Dana, your insights today have brought just so much attention just to the profound impact of hydration in our health. And I think hydration is something that so many of us can forget. Like you were just saying, even you forget sometimes. I definitely forget sometimes, working all day long. And I think this episode is just going to serve as a great reminder and filled with so many educational tips on how to properly hydrate, not just with water, but with our food, which is super interesting. I haven't heard too many practitioners talk about that before. So thank you so much for bringing that up and just how we can hydrate in congruency with our biology. And before we wrap up, I do have a question for you that our previous podcast guest had left you. So, if you could guarantee one aspect of your health to stay as optimal as you want for as long as you age, what would that be?
It'd have to be blood sugar. Yeah, it'd have to be blood sugar stabilization. Insulin, that whole system of insulin and blood sugar. And by the way, there was a study that showed in mice, granted, that water can be a treatment for metabolic syndrome.
Amazing.
Just by giving them water, right? So
I was thinking, is she going to link it back to this hydration and ding,
yes.
ding, 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 ding?
But,
I love that.
If you had to ask me, I think the blood sugar is, if we could keep stable insulin, blood sugar, that whole relationship, then we will all live longer and healthier.
Have you seen that in practice, Dr. Dana? I have to ask, in terms of someone is very well educated on, not overdoing refined carbohydrate, they're strength training, they're regulating their stress, and then they start to become hydrated and their insulin resistance is improved?
I thought you were going to ask me something. I thought you were going to say, and that no matter what they do, their blood sugar. I thought you were going to ask me the total opposite question. I had it in my head that no matter what they do, their blood sugar is still a problem.
Well, yes, initially.
Yeah.
I'm sure you see that often before they start to hydrate properly. And it's the worst. It's really, it's hard. That's a practitioner's like nightmare, because what do you do? This is a person who's doing everything, and it's genes, and you can't get to that root cause on that person. And yes, I would say a handful of times, maybe more than a handful of times. I mean, it's never been like the one sort of thing, but I've had people, super healthy people who I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to help this person. They're doing everything right, and then I talk about hydration and the light bulb goes off on them, and they're like now just over the edge and improving in a phenomenal way. I'll tell you a case history. It's going in my next book. He was a PA, a physician's assistant, who read Quench. He does a form of exercise called calisthenics, which, by the way, I didn't know was a real true form of exercise. I thought it was just calisthenics, like a term for thing. Did you know that? Yeah. That it's a real... I think about aerobics. I just think
about that's what I thought. It's not. It's a vigorous, difficult type of exercise where you have to hold these poses and do these things. And so he was this calisthenics expert. He's a PA, so he's super knowledgeable, read the book, and all he did was change one thing. He had a green smoothie a day and put some chia seeds into his morning water. So figured out how to hydrate a little bit better, and like had a 700 times improvement. That was his words, in holding these poses and doing this thing. What? So yeah, that was and he reached out to me to sort of he couldn't wait to sort of tell me. So yes, it's hard to say, like I do so many different things, but the person who is already super healthy, has a blood sugar problem, then hydrates. I can't quite, I'm not going to lie and say, oh yes, that, I had that instance. I haven't, but probably I'm seeing that every day just by adding that hydration in from the beginning.
I'm so glad you wrote up chia seeds, because you can see it. It's undeniable. You can feel it and see it. And it, it changes your regular coconut milk into this luxurious, pudding, whatever.
Gel pudding. It's gel. You see the gel. It holds 30 times its weight more.
It's undeniable.
It really is a superfood. Chia seeds are great. Yeah.
Let's leave our listeners with some more resources. So where can we find you, your website, your social channels, and where can we purchase your existing book and hopefully your upcoming book as well?
Yes, thank you. So it's drdanacohen.com is my website. drdanacohen or at drdanacohen is my Instagram and Facebook. And, anywhere books are sold is where this book, Quench, you can still get on Amazon. If you can't find it, call my office. We can get you one. And then my new book is coming out in September, and it's sort of like the next step from hydration is just how to get more whole foods into your diet by cheating your way to good health with a blender. It's once again a simple message that all of us need to hear and make use of and follow, and nothing difficult. No diets. Diets are out.
I love that. Diets are out.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yes.
What a
Thanks
powerful way to
again.
end. I
Yeah.
love that. Yes.
Well, thanks, Dr. Dana. Thank you for your time and just your invaluable knowledge you've shared with us. And I appreciate you joining us and just for your work in general in the field of medicine that you're in. And I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in today. And until next time, wishing you vibrant health.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guest and host are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.